Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we will be learning today with Hashem Daf Samach Amid Beis. We pick up in Hilchas Tefillin Siman Lamed Vav and we pick up with Sif Beis 2 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Mechaber, Kol Ois Tzricha Lihiyos Goylam Echad. Every letter has to be one continuous unit. A letter cannot be split into two pieces. So kol ois tzricha lihiyos goylam echad. A goylam echad is one block or one unit. It has to be continuous. The ink has to be continuous. Lakach, therefore, says the Mechaber, tzarech lihiyos banekuda shal ha'alef shehi kimin yud. When it comes to the mark that is on top of an aleph, which is similar to a yud. What does that mean? Well, an aleph can be seen as being comprised of three primary parts. There's the diagonal line that it forms the center of the aleph, and we've seen the Mishnah Berurah refer to that as the gag, the roof of the aleph. And then there's a yud on the upper right-hand side of the aleph, and then there's another upside-down yud, sort of, on the lower left-hand side of the aleph. Says the Mechaber, tzarech liyos hanekuda, tzarech liyos banekuda shala aleph kimin yud. When it comes to the mark of the aleph, the upper one, which is like a yud, ubanekuda shetachteha, and so too the mark that is on the underside to the left of the aleph, which is also like a yud, ubeyude hashin, so too the three upper yudin that make up the three top marks of a shin, v'ha'ayin, or the two upper yudin of an ayin. An ayin has two yudin on top of its two heads, v'achayre tzadi, and so too the yud that forms the upper right-hand side of a tzadik, sheyu noigos ba'is. All of these have to be connected to the main body of the ois. So again, what's the Mechaber telling me here? He told me, Kol ois tzricha liyos goylam echad. Every letter has to be comprised of one single continuous unit. So when you make an aleph, and you make the central part of the aleph, and then you make a yud on top, and you make a yud on the bottom, those two yudin have to touch the central part of the aleph. When you make a shin and you make three yudin on top, they have to join, they all have to meet the bottom central part of the shin. When you make an ayin, you have two yudin on top, they have to be connected to the body of the ayin. When you make a tzadi, the upper right hand yud has to connect to the main body of the tzadi. Uba'achas she'ena noigas, and if you have any part of any one of these letters where it's not connected to the main body of the letter, psulin, then the tefillin are puzzle, because that letter is not written the right way. It doesn't have the proper tzuras ha'ois, and therefore it is puzzle. Continues the Mechaber, v'chein b'shar oisiyos, and the same is true of all the other letters of the aleph beis. If you make a beis could be seen as being comprised of, let's say, a dalid and then a floor, right? The line that forms the bottom of the beis. If the top of the beis and the bottom of the beis are not connected, you don't have the tzuras ha'ois, it would be puzzle. Now the Mechaber mentions two exceptions. Chutz mehei v'kuf. This is true that every letter has to be one continuous unit by all of the letters of the aleph beis, with the exception of a hey and a kuf. A hey has a freestanding foot at the left, at the lower left. That freestanding foot, it's not connected to the other part of the hey. A kuf is kind of like a reish on top and like a nun soifis going from the middle of the reish down below the line. That lower part of the kuf is freestanding. It doesn't touch the upper body of the kuf. So by hey and kuf, it's not true that the ois is a goylam echad. It's not one single continuous unit. It's those letters are comprised of two different parts that are not in contact one with the other. She'ein liga haregel bagag. When it comes to the hey or the kuf, the freestanding foot is not supposed to be touching the main body or the gag, the roof, the top of the letter. V'im naga, and if the lower left-hand leg of the hey or the lower left-hand leg of the kuf is touching the gag, the roof of the letter, or any other part of the letter, puzzle, then that hey and that kuf would be puzzle. Okay, now let's take a look over here in the Mishnah Berurah. We're about halfway down, a little bit more than halfway down, in the first column of the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Vav, says the Mishnah Berurah Hashin v'ha'ayin. We said that the shin has 3 upper yudin, the ayin has 2 upper yudin. Those yudin have to be in contact with the main part of the letter, with the base of the shin, the base of the ayin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is true b'chol haroshim, by all 3 upper yudin of the shin. All 3 of them have to be in contact with the base of the shin, and both of the yudin on the top of the ayin have to be in contact with the base of the ayin. Ois Katan Zayin, the Mechaber said, Uba'achas she'eino nogas, if you have even one part that's not touching the main body of the letter, then the Mechaber said Psulin. Says the Mishnah Berurah Uba'achas, Pirush, what the explanation of what the Mechaber is saying is, Afilu b'yud echad min hashin, even if only one out of the 3 yudin on top of the shin are not in contact with the bottom of the shin, it's puzzle. Not only is the shin puzzle if one of the yudin on top don't make contact with the main body of the letter, it's also true that if there's a split anywhere in the middle of an ois, so that the ois is split into 2, that renders the letter puzzle. Ois Katan Ches she'eino nogas. We have a psul over here if part of the letter is not touching, it's not in contact with the rest of the letter. Says the Chavetz Chaim, this is true that this is a problem. Afilu im hapirud hudak, even if the separation is extremely thin. She'ein pridasai nikar lahedya, even if the separation is such that when you look at the letter, you don't readily recognize that there's a split. You have to look again, and then you notice, when you look carefully, you notice that it's split. Still in all, if it's split, that is a problem. Now, it is brought down that this is only true if the split ultimately is recognizable to the naked eye. If you need a magnifying glass to see the split, then it's not a problem. It's le'nitna HaTorah l'malachei hashares. The seifrim are not mechuyev to have microscopes. So if the split, for a split to be a problem, it has to be a recognizable split to the naked eye. But what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here is, it doesn't have to be such a clear split that you see right away, oh look, that letter is split. It could be you have to take a careful look, but if you take a careful look, it's recognizable to the naked eye that it's split, that's a problem. Furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, V'loi mahani kan kriyas hatinoik, the fact that a tinoik reads the letter properly. So if you have a shin where one of the yudin is not connected to the body of the shin, there's no doubt that the tinoik is going to read that as a shin. He recognizes that the basic form of the letter is a shin, even if one of the yudin is separate. Says the Chavetz Chaim over here, kriyas hatinoik doesn't help us. That doesn't make it kosher. Kevin sheyaduahu ha'ois ve'ein litois ba'acher. The reason the tinoik is reading it as a shin is because he recognizes that it has the shape of a shin. So he sees a shin, he's going to call it a shin. But that doesn't help us. That doesn't make it a shin. We know it's split. The fact that it's split is a psul. The dafke im griyusai machma sheyesh safek l'damoisai la'ois acher. It's only when we have a shaila, we have an ois that inherently is written properly. But we have a question, does it look more like one letter or like another letter? For example, we have a vav. The vav was really written properly, but it's a bit short. Now we want to know, is it possible that it looks like a yud? We have a suffix on this vav. Does it look like a vav or does it look like a yud? Oz moyel kriyas hatinoik. That's when it helps to show it to a tinoik, and a tinoik will say, oh, it's a vav. Then it's a vav. But if the tinoik says it's a yud, then it's a yud. But in that case, we're not using the tinoik to tell us that a letter that we know is inherently flawed is okay. A tinoik can't do that. What a tinoik could do is he could clear up a suffix that we have. The letter is inherently okay. But it could be that this vav looks a little bit short. It might look like a yud. That doubt the tinoik could clear up for us. But if a letter is inherently flawed, a tinoik can't help us with that. Ukidel b'siman lamid beis sif tesvav, where we saw this. Oz moyel kriyas hatinoik. I went back a line. Ukidel b'siman lamid beis sif tesvav. V'chol zeh b'loy tikun. This halacha that there's a psul over here, if there's a split, is where where you haven't fixed it. And that's when the kriyas hatinoik is not effective. In other words, if you have a letter that has a split in it, the kriyas hatinoik cannot render that letter kosher. But there is something that the kriyas hatinoik could help us out with, even when it comes to a split letter. What is that? Aval al yidei tikun mahani. But if our question is that we want to fix the shin, let me give you just a basic akdama over here so you properly understand what the Mishnah Berurah is saying. Remember that we have a halacha by tefillin that tefillin have to be written kisidron, right? Now let's say you wrote Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Now later we realize that there's a split in the shin, so that one of the yudin was never connected to the shin. Can the kriyas hatinoik make that shin a kosher shin? No. The shin is inherently flawed. It's not a kosher shin, and right now the tefillin are not kosher tefillin. A tinoik will come and say it's a shin, doesn't help us. Why? Because Avadi he recognizes it as a shin. That doesn't help us. But now I want the sefer to fix that shin. Oh, wait a second. Tefillin have to be written kisidron. Can the sefer go now and fix the shin, even though we already wrote the rest of the word Shema and Yisrael and Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? Can we fix it now, or now it's Shaloi Kisidron? So here's where a tinoik can help us. Since a tinoik recognizes that shin as a shin, even though it's a pasal shin, still when the sefer goes back to fix it, we don't say that now there's a problem of Shaloi Kisidron. Why? Because now we look at it that it's not pshat that you're writing the shin now. The shin was already there. The shin is a psul. We're fixing the psul, but it's not that we're writing the shin now. If the tinoik wouldn't be able to read it as a shin, then the shin's not there. Then we want to go back and fix the shin. You can't do that. That's Shaloi Kisidron. But since the tinoik can read it as a shin, then halachically it's as if the shin is already there, just it's got a psul, so we fix it. But that's not a problem of Shaloi Kisidron. Let's see it inside. Aval yidei tikun mahani deloit levi Shaloi Kisidron imatina karoi la'ois. Ukidel b'siman lamid beis sif chavei. Now he just reminds us of a halacha that we had earlier in Siman Lamed Beis. V'ayin sham mashakasav de b'shem agoyin Rabbi Kiva Eger. Back over there in Siman Lamed Beis, we had a very big chiddush from Rabbi Kiva Eger, which was that even if the split in the letter is very, very clear, let's say we have a shin, and one of the yudin of the shin is mamish not connected to the body of the shin. It's not something that you have to look twice at. Right away, it's mamish not connected. Rabbi Kiva Eger says, even in such a case, as long as the tinoik reads it as a shin, or as an ayin, or whatever letter we're talking about, you could go back and fix it, and there's no problem of Shaloi Kisidron. U'le'inyin yud sha'acharei atzadi, but we also had a chumrah in Siman Lamed Beis. When it comes to the yud that is at the back upper right-hand side of the tzadi, right? The tzadi has kind of two yudin on top. The one on the left, it goes down at an angle towards the right. It hits the bottom and comes across. On the upper right-hand side of the tzadi, there's just a yud that goes down to the central diagonal of the tzadi. So we learned over there that if that yud is separated from the rest of the tzadi to the degree that it looks like there's a yud and then a nun. You see, if you separate the upper right-hand yud from the tzadi, then the rest of the tzadi kind of looks like a nun. It looks like a nun where the central portion of it is very much slanted to the left. But it looks like a nun. So if you separate that yud, if that yud is so separated from the rest of the tzadi that it looks like there's a yud and then a nun, im nireh ki yud v'nun, then we said in the Bir Halacha over there that if the Sefer wants to fix that, he has to completely erase the tzadi. He has to erase the yud, erase the nun, and then write a tzadi. Because this doesn't look like a tzadi at all. This is not a tzadi, it's a yud and a nun. So you can't just fix it. You got to erase the whole thing and then make a new tzadi. That would be a problem of Shaloi Kisidron if you already wrote further. When we're talking about these psulim, when there's a split in the letter, there's no difference if this split occurred at the time that the letter was originally written, or the split formed after the letter was written. This problem of a split is not only by the letters that the Mechaber mentions over here, it's not only by the Yud, by the Shin, by the Ayin, by the Tzadi, it's by all the other letters as well. Kigoin, for example, says the Chavetz Chaim, Hanikudo Shalamata Shebegimel. The Gimel at the floor has a little piece that goes out to the right. If that little piece is not touching the rest of the Gimel, that's a problem. Hanikudo Shebepei. Or the little upside down yud that's in the central portion of a pei. If it's not touching the gag of the pei, that's a problem. Or the left hand foot of the tuf. If any of these parts of these letters are not touching the rest of the ice, it's a problem. Or if there's a split inside any ice. Ice cut and yud. In this halacha, the hey and the kuf are different than all the other letters because the hey and the kuf both have freestanding parts. The hey has the lower left-hand regel, which is freestanding, and the kuf has the long left-hand regel that is freestanding. She'ein liga. When it comes to those two letters, those freestanding parts of the letters may not come into contact with the rest of the letter. Ulechatchila yeh hefsik, there should be enough of a separation between the main body of the letter and the freestanding part, bichdei she'adam beinani yakirenu heitev me'al sefer Torah she'al gabe abima kishehu kairei boy. That a person of average height who is standing over the bima and looking down at the sefer Torah, he should be able to recognize the separation between the freestanding part of the ice and the rest of the ice. L'chatchila, that's how much of a separation there should be, that to an average person, a person of average height, he should recognize that it's separated right away. Gam lo yarchikoi yoiser me oivi agag. How much should the freestanding part of the ice be separated from the rest of the ice? So let's say by the hay, you have the gag, you have the right-hand regel, and then you have the freestanding left-hand regel. There has to be space between the top of the freestanding left-hand regel and the gag, the roof of the hay. How much space should there be? Says the Chavetz Chaim, it should not be larger, me'oive hagag, than the thickness of the roof itself. Oiskat Yod Aleph, Bagag, by these letters, by the Hey and the Kuf, the freestanding part cannot touch the Gag. So too, let's say the leg, the left-hand leg of the Kuf that goes down beneath the line, not only is it not allowed to touch the roof of the Kuf, it's also not allowed to touch the right-hand wall of the Kuf either. And And this is also a problem, even if the connection would form after the ksiva. Let's say the tefillin were written, and the tefillin are 10 years old, and they've always been kosher, and now the sofer is checking it, and when he checks it, he drops a drop of ink. He has a wet kulmus nearby, and he picks it up, and he drops a drip of ink, and it connects the freestanding part of the hay to the body of the hay. Even though it happened 10 years after it was written, it's a problem. You got to fix it. And even if the point at which it becomes connected is very, very thin, it's like a chotasayra. There's a dash of ink, the width of a hair. But it doesn't matter. If it's connected, it's connected. U'kamoishen ispar la'el b'siman lamed beis, sif yod ches b'Mishnah Berurah sham, v'ayin sham b'inyin tikana oisim loy kasav achar zeh. The elav hachiev shaloi kesidron, and he says, take a look over there. As far as the issue, if it did become connected later on, can you go ahead and fix it now by making a separation, or do you have a problem of shaloi kesidron? Okay, now we move on to Sif Gimel. Bottom line in the Mechaber here on Samach Amid Beis. We know the famous Gemara that says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was Mekabel the Torah Kedoshah on Har Sinai, he saw that in the future there was going to be a great Tana, the great Rabbi Akiva, who was going to darshan the tagin of the Oisiyos. He was going to darshan the crowns that are written on the letters. We don't know what halachas are learned from the tagin. We don't know the drushas from the tagin. At least I don't know them. But Rabbi Akiva apparently darshaned the tagin on the letters. You see the chashivas, Rabbi Isai, the chashivas of the letters, the chashivas of every part of the letters. There's nothing over here by accident. I must have said it over before in the context of this shir. It's something that I say all the time. Could you imagine, Rabbi Isai, for a moment? Could you imagine even for a moment if you were in the bank or you were in the post office and you're waiting online, and you heard two Einoi Yehudim having a discussion, or having an in-depth discussion about the I'm being careful with my words over here, about the eights, Ayin Tzaddik, the eights that they have, B'soich HaChag Shelohem, the eights that they use on their Chag. And imagine that they're having a conversation. Are you hi, nice to meet you. Are you makpid on a real eights, or do you use a synthetic eights? You know, you could go to Target and you could buy a plastic one. Are you makpid on a real eights, or do you use a plastic eights? And how about what you put on the eights? How many ornaments do you put on? Are you makbid? Is there a specific number of ornaments that you put on? Is there a minimum shear? Is there a maximum shear? How about the height of the eights? How many tfachim tall does it have to be? How about the position that you put it in? Pesach habayis. Does it have to be next to a window? Does it have to be next to a door? You're never going to hear such a discussion. Never. Why? Because it's all baloney. It's all baloney. It doesn't have any basis in anything. Most of the Einei Yehudim themselves, they don't realize that this comes from pagan. It comes from paganism. It doesn't come from Hadas Shelohem. It comes from pagan rites. So you're never going to hear such a conversation because there's no reality to it. There's no divinity to it. Memela, there's no minimum shear. There's no maximum shear. There's no requirements. There's no requirements at all. It's all man-made. It's all baloney. But by us, there's requirements on everything. Why? Because it's divine. Because it's Torah Misinai. Because it's real. And since it's real, it has requirements. You know, the engine of your car has requirements. You can't just buy a box of parts and screw them together haphazardly, throw it under your hood, put your hands over it, and say, I hereby call thee an engine, and now suddenly the car will work. There's a reality. If the wires aren't connected to the spark plugs, on one end and to the electrical system on the other end, then they're not going to make a spark. And if there isn't fuel coming into the cylinder, then there isn't going to be an explosion when the spark plug goes off. And if there isn't a piston, then when the explosion occurs, there's going to be nothing driving the piston. And if there's no piston, there's going to be nothing driving the crankshaft. And if there's no crankshaft, there's going to be nothing attached to the torque converter, and there's going to be nothing driving the engine. And if there's nothing driving the transmission, nothing is turning the wheels. And if there's no drive shaft, you could turn the engine and turn the torque converter and turn the transmission as much as you want. If there's no drive shaft, there's nothing bringing the motion to the engines. So there's a reality. And memela, there are requirements. It has to be done a certain way. And it has to be tuned properly. It has to be set up properly. We have a reality. The letters are the letters. If the aleph is not an aleph, don't tell me the tefillin are tefillin. You don't have the ice. Here, finally, at the end of Siman Lamed Vav, we're talking about the tagin, Rabbi Isai. The tagin, the little crowns that are on top of the letters. But that's a reality. It's divine. It's Torah Sinai. So there are requirements. Says the Mechaber, bottom line here, Samach Hamid Beis. Tzarech letayeg shatnez gates. We have to put crowns on the letters of shatnez gates. Shatnez gates is a mnemonic. These are the letters that have the little three-pronged crowns. Shin, Ayin, Tes, Nun, Zayin, Gimel, Tzadi. And this is both by a Tzadi Pshuta and a Nun Pshuta that appear in the middle of a word, or by the Nun, it's not the Nun Pshuta, the Nun Kefufa and the Tzadi Kefufa, the bent ones. Those are the ones that appear in the middle, and the Nun Seifis and the Tzadi Seifis. They both have to have crowns. So all of these letters have to have crowns. The Mechaber continues and he says, V'aseifrim nagu letayeg oisios acherois. Besides the Shatnez gates, that we have a Kabbalah that they have to have tagin, the Seifrim also have a minig to put tagin on other letters as well. V'im loy tieg afilu Shatnez gates. If you failed to place the tagin on the letters of Shatnez gates, loy posal. The tefillin are not going to be posal. Now we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah, I think it's going to be tomorrow's shir, we'll see that there's a machlokes haposkim, whether or not lamaisa does the lack of tagin posel or not. But for the Mechaber over here, and he brings this from a rush, the Mechaber paskins that the lack of tagin does not render the tefillin posel. Okay, let's go back into Samach Hamid Beis in the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cutting your Beis letayeg. We have to place crowns on the letters of Shatnez gates. Says the Mishnah Berurah something that at first glance seems a little bit odd. He says this is true afilu b'Sefer Torah. Even in a Sefer Torah, the letters of Shatnez gates are required to have tagin. V'chol shekein b'tefillin u'mezuzos, and kal v'chomer, certainly by tefillin and mezuzos, you have to have tagin on the letters of Shatnez gates. What exactly is the kal v'chomer over here? Why is it that we would think that a Sefer Torah is more kal than tefillin and mezuzos, so that maybe tefillin and mezuzos require tagin, but Sefer Torah do not? I'm not sure. I think the answer might be in the Ramah that we learned yesterday on the top line of Samach Hamid Beis, where the Ramah says, Ulechatchila yichtov b'ksiva tama, k'mavur b'tor u'b'shar poskim. There's this halacha that the Ramah says that tefillin have to be written with a ksiva tama. Ksiva tama means a perfect writing, a complete and perfect writing. I'm not sure that we find the halacha of ksiva tama by Sifrei Torah. And if I'm correct that the halacha of ksiva tama is not written in the context of Sifrei Torah, then we would understand why the Mishnah Berurah makes this kal v'chomer. Maybe if I get a chance, I'll do a little bit more research into it. But let's go weiter over here. Mishnah Berurah is cutting your base. V'tagin ha'elu, these tagin that we are speaking about, heim shloisha tagin kitanim v'dakim kechot hasayra. These are three little tagin, three little prongs, little crowns, little lines. He says they are thin, kechot hasaira, like the width of a hair. Zekufais, standing up, al elu ha'oisiyos, on top of these letters of Shatnez Gats. Echad miyamin. Now the Mishnah Berurah brings down two different descriptions of precisely how these tagin were supposed to be written. And first he brings down, if you look at the Sharet Zion, he brings down from the Tur in Yeridea, in Hilchos Sifrei Torah, and he brings down from the Beis Yosef. He says, Echad miyamin, one tag comes out on the right of the top of the letter, the Echad mismoil, one comes out on the left, the Echad milamala, and one going straight up. Now what this means, Rabbi say, one day, I'm saying one day, but I don't know how much longer we're going to be learning Hilchos Tefillin. One day I'll finally get my act together, and when I want to make pictures, I'll make the pictures before we come to share, not after we're already in the middle of the share. I don't know why I can't remember to make these pictures before share, but in any case, since you guys like me, I guess you'll stick with me. All right, let me make over here a quick little shin. Okay, here we have a shin, Rabbi Isai. Now I'm going to apply tagin. So the first description given here by the Mishnah Berurah says one goes on the right. It says, his words are, let me find it here, Echad miyamin, one to the right, the Echad mismoil, one to the left, the Echad lamayla, and one up on top. Look the way I did the tag. You see the way I did the tag? I did one coming off one side of the yud at the top of the shin on the left over there. Trying to get the camera to focus in on it. Hello, camera. Okay. And notice that I bent the tagin to the side. Right? This tag over here, right, goes out that way. And on the other side, it goes out the other way. Right? See that? And then the middle one goes straight up to the top. That seems to be the proper understanding of this opinion in the Mishnah Berurah. I'll read it again inside. Echad miyamin, one from the right, and the one that is from the right edge goes out to the right. The echad mismail, one comes off the left edge of that yud at the top, and it goes out to the left. The echad milamayla, and one goes up straight. That's the first opinion. V'yesh omrim, but then there's another opinion that says the shloshtan milamayla, that all three of them go straight up. We'll draw that. Okay, look at this shin over here. Over here, I made the three tagin. They all go straight up. Instead of it being one bent out to one side, one bent out to the other side, and one in the middle going straight up, now I made all three of them going straight up. So here we have two opinions. And now the Mishnah Berurah says, V'chein noyagin. And we're noyag like this latter opinion that all three tagin should go straight up. Ukein kav daku kol tag v'tag. And first the Mishnah Berurah says, each one of these tagin, what do they look like? The individual tagin, it's a kav dak. All it is a thin line. Now on my tagin over here, you will notice that it's not just a line. You see a little mark on top. And that's going to be like the second opinion that the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, where each one of these tagin should look like a little zayin. So it should have like a little yud sort of on top, and then a thin line going down. But that's not what the Mishnah Berurah said here. Here the Mishnah Berurah said, "Ukein kav daku kol tag v'tag." Each one of these three prongs, all it is a line. That's it. Just three lines going up. And the Chavetz Chaim says, "Kach hagin beilo ha'arotzos." He says in his regions, that's the way they were noyek. Just 3 lines going straight up, not out to the sides, and just 3 lines going straight up. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'toiv yoiser, it is better, lasois kol echad ke'ein tmuna zayin, that each one of the 3 prongs should be like a miniature zayin. So that means each one of the prongs should have a roish. And that's what I did over here. I made that each one has a roish. Each one has a top that's almost like a little yud, kind of. And then a line going down. But they should be very small and very thin, says the Mishnah Berurah. Ois cut yud gimel, these tagin go on top of the letters that we have the mnemonic shatnez gates. V'hu adin tzadi kefufa v'nun pshuta. And we put the tagin on the tzadi kefufa, that's the regular tzadi, v'nun pshuta, and on the nun seifis. The reason that he says it this way, the tzadi kefufa, is because shatnez gates, the mnemonic, the tzadi in the mnemonic of shatnez gates is the tzadi pshuta. It's the straight, the tzadi seifis. So he's telling you also the tzadi kefufa. The nun in shatnez gates is the nun kefufa, so he reminds you that it also applies to the nun pshuta, to the nun seifis. Continues the Mishnah Berurah here in Kat Yud Gimel. V'em haisef ha-sofer lasos tagin chutz me oisiyoi shatnez gates. If the sofer makes additional tagin on additional letters other than the letters of shatnez gates, v'chutz me elu amuzkarim batur ubelavush shenagu b'hem ha-sofrim, and not only does he make tagin on letters other than shatnez gates, but he even makes tagin on letters other than the other letters that the lavush and the Torah bring down. So we know shatnez gates. Then besides shatnez gates, the Torah and the lavush bring down other letters that have tagin. Now says the Mishnah Berurah, if the sofer adds tagin even onto more letters, loy ikev. It's not liikuva. It doesn't pass all the tefillin. Ach b'tnai sheyu mechubarim laha'ois. But there's a caveat, and that is that whatever additional tagin you're making, they have to be attached to an ois. You can't have marks hanging around in between lines by the tefillin. If you're adding tagin to other letters, they have to be attached to the ois. So too the regular tagin, the shatnez gates tagin, we're going to see those also have to be attached to the ois. It's not pshat that if you put a tag on shatnez gates, so even if it's separated from the letter, it's okay. No. All of the tagin have to be attached to letters. The shatnez gates tagin have to be attached to the letters. The tagin on top of the letters added by the Torah and the lavush have to be attached to the letters. And any other tagin that you add on must be attached to letters. If you have tagin that are not attached to a letter, you should erase them. Even if you made tagin over the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and if you didn't attach them to the letters, erase those tagin. Even though you're getting uncomfortably close to the letters of the shem, doesn't matter. You can't have little dashes, little lines hanging around on the tefillin not attached to ois. You have to erase them. Certainly, lechatchila, you have no business adding tagin. There should only be tagin on the letters that are brought down in the svarim, that they should have tagin. Now he goes on to describe these tagin in greater detail. V'tiug shel shatnez gates, the formation of the tagin on the letters of shatnez gates, hu bashin. When it comes to the shin, where does the tag go? Al roish hashlishi shel ha'ois. It goes on the final roish, on the final top of the shin. Uba'ayin v'tes v'tzadi. And when it comes to the ayin and the tes and the tzadi, each one of those have 2 heads on top. Al roish hasmali. It always goes on the leftmost roish. V'yad bikain be'emtzi'isai loy b'soifai. And the tagin should not come out from the edges of the roish. they should come out from the middle of the Rosh. Kasva Achrayim, the Achrayim write B'chein Tshuvas HaRamah, in the name of the Tshuvas HaRamah, and this Tshuvas HaRamah is the subject of a lot of dispute, exactly how to understand this Tshuvas HaRamah, and the Mishnah Berurah kind of alludes to it in a very vague way. Kasva Achrayim B'shem Tshuvas HaRamah, Sheyizar Sheyu tagin nifrodin kol echad mechaveroi. First, the Tshuvas HaRamah says that the tagin should be separate from each other. Kedei shelo yerou rak kitvunas ziyunin v'loi ka'ayin v'shin. We don't want the tagin. Let me make a little picture over here. I'm making a yud, but imagine that yud that I'm making is one of the yudin that are on top of a shin. Okay, it's not just a freestanding yud, and I'm going to make tagin on top of it. We want, says the Tshuvas HaRamah, that the tagin should be separate, right? There's 3 prongs. We want the 3 prongs to be separate. Come on, camera, click in. Woo, camera. One day I'll get the knack of this camera. Okay, there you go. You see it focused. You see how the 3 prongs are separate from each other. That's what we want, says the Mishnah Berurah. Now that's in contrast to, I'm going to make another yud here now, and another set of tagin. Okay, look at the one that I did now. Hello, camera. Camera. Okay, there we go. You see the bottom yud? You see here the tagin come together at the bottom. Now, if I cover up that yud and I only show you the tagin, what does it look like? It looks like a shin. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say in the name of the Tshuvas HaRamah. We want the tagin to be separate one from the other, so it looks like 3 freestanding zayins. Not to connect them to each other, so that the 3 tagin look like a shin. Or if you would only have 2 prongs, it would look like an ayin. We don't want that. Let's see it inside. Kasra Achrayim B'shem Tshuvas HaRamah, Sheyizayer, we should take care, Sheyu tagin nifrodin kol echad mechaveroi. Each prong of the tag should be separate, one from the other. Kedei shelo yerou rak kitvunas ziyunin, so they should look like 3 freestanding zayins. V'loi ka'ayin v'shin. Shouldn't look like an ayin or a shin. U'li'ikuvahu. And the Tshuvas HaRamah says that this is li'ikuva. Gam tzarech sheyu tagin noigin b'kuva'os. Also, like we mentioned earlier, the tag must be connected to the ois. V'ilavach psulin. If the tagin are not connected to the ois, they're puzzle. Why? Sounds crazy. Wait a second. We said that the tagin themselves are not ma'akiv. Really, if you don't have tagin, the tefillin are kosher without tagin. And now you're telling me that that if the tagin are somehow not connected to the ois, the tefillin are puzzle? Why? So fine, they're not connected to the ois, so you don't have tagin. Why is it suddenly puzzle? Oh, the Mishnah Berurah explains. Even though the mechaber said that the tagin are not ma'akiv, so that strictly speaking, you don't even have to have the tagin, ze gora. It's worse to have the tagin and have the tagin not connected to the ois. That's worse than not having the tagin. Why? Because now, if you made a tag and the tag is not connected to an ois, what are these 3 zayins? It looks like you have 3 little zayins in between the lines on the tefillin. You have extra letters on the tefillin. You can't have that. If it's connected to the ois, so it's a tag. It's part of the shin. It's part of the ayin. But if it's not connected to the ois, what is it? It's extra letters on the tefillin. Can't have that. It's possible. Vayin b'yad Ephraim, and he says, take a look at the yad Ephraim. Shekosov writes, D'loi mahani af im yamshichem achakach ela ois. The yad Ephraim says that you want to go to the sefer now, and you want the sefer to connect the tag to the ois? No, that doesn't work. Rak tzarich l'goyram u'lekosvam mechadash. Rather, you have to erase the tag and make new tagin. I think the reason for the Yad Ephraim is, if it's a tag, so okay, it's part of the shin. If it wasn't a tag, if when it was written, it was never connected to the ice, so what is it? It's 3 zayins. Now you're taking a zayin and you're connecting it to a shin to make it a tag? Can't do that. It was a freestanding letter. You can't change it into a tag. Rak, im yadinon sheksavan mumcha. If you know that these tefillin were written by a sofer mumcha, talinon, then we could assume shenifrad acha shenichtav, that the separation occurred after it was written, umachshirin b'hamshach elois. And then we can make it kosher if the sofer reconnected it. Why? Because then what we're assuming is that it was written as a tag. So it was a tag. It was part of the shin. It got separated. Okay, now we can fix it. But if it was never written as a tag, right, because it was never connected, yeah, it was written as a tag, but the sofer never connected it to the letter, then I don't care what he had in his mind, it's not a tag. It's a zayin hanging out between the lines. Then you can't just reconnect it. But if it was originally connected and it got separated, then you could connect it. V'alavushe Srad Kasav, the Lavushe Srad writes on this Chuvas Harama, the Harama Svirale de Loigara Darazem Echesran Akavas Gvil, Deina Ma'akiv Rak Betchila. The Lavushe Srad learns the Rama, and he says that the Rama wasn't so machmir. He looks at this as similar to the requirement of Akafas Gvil. That's only ma'akiv when it was first written. The same way, the halacha of akafas gvil is only a problem when the tefillin were originally written. He says over here, when the letter was originally written, the tag had to be attached to the letter. But if it gets separated later, kosher b'loy tikkun klal, you don't even have to fix it. If it we should be machmir like the Yad Ephraim, that we should fix the letters if the tagin became separated. V'ayin b'pri megadim. Okay, we'll do one more ois over here. We'll do ois yudalid. The Mechaber said that the Sofer have a minig to add tagin onto other letters other than Shatnei's gates. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Tefillin ois yasacheris malvad elu. The Sofer have a minig to add tagin to other letters other than Shatnei's gates. Vehem was karim bator b'shem hashimush harabah u'b'shem harambam. And these letters are brought down in the Torah in the name of the Shimush Rabbah, who quotes it from a Rambam. V'atagin elu heim taginim gedolim. These are larger tagin. But they should be thin so that they shouldn't change the form of the letter. He says in specific, you have to be very careful with the little one-pronged tag that appears on the top of the vav or on top of the yud. Because it's very easy to change the vav or change the yud by adding an overlarge tag. You could change the yud, I guess, into a vav, and maybe you could change the vav maybe into a limud, I guess. Okay, we will continue Miras Hashem with Tzamach Aleph Amun Aleph tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schos of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs parnas and shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the B'Yeskel Tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.